let me tell you about the time that I blew the interview for Harvard Business School.
You blew it!
Hopefully me sharing the experience can help impart these lessons to you in a much easier way than I had to learn them. So I was working at Deloitte and like many other consultants debating whether or not I should get my MBA when, I attended a webinar by Wharton where they had pictures of people trekking Antarctica and talking about all the different cool things they have in the program. And I thought, damn, this is something I need to do before I die. See, top programs like Wharton and Harvard are really tough to get into though. So I knew I had my work cut out for me. I knew I had a good chance, being a Latino, having a nonprofit, having decent extracurriculars in college, but I also knew I had a lot of red flags. I had a 2.7 GPA in high school. I didn't go to Ivy League for undergrad. I had to transfer into University of Maryland, go Terps. I also didn't really have a unique job. There are several hundred Deloitters applying for these schools every year. But I remember thinking that, if I could just get past the applications and get into the interview, I was a lock. I'd never really been the smartest person in the room, definitely not the one with the best grades, but I can always try to count on myself being one of the friendliest people in the room. Part of this is strategy, knowing, that I'm not the smartest guy, but part of it is also just the way I want to live my life. I don't think we should be walking around being so serious all the time. I think we should have some jokes. But anyways, I was convinced I wanted to get into these top MBA programs, so I spent all of 2019 living and breathing MBA applications. I stopped going out with my friends on the weekends so I could study for the tests. I spent countless hours writing essays. I joined the MLT program, so I was going to these conferences and different schools. I'd pretty much spent all my saved up cash on these applications. So in this process, you learn that the Harvard application is one of the longest, the most thorough, and also the one that's due earliest. So it makes sense to spend pretty much all your time at first on that application and then leverage that to fill out the rest. So spending pretty much 90% of my time and effort on the Harvard application really got me thinking that, hey, this is the only school that matters. This is the only goal in your life. I was giving up my sleep, my sanity, and my overall happiness to work on this application for Harvard. But this visualization of me being in Boston and wearing the Harvard hat really kept me going and pushing through the hard moments. So I submit the application, I wait a month or so, and eventually I get back an email and it says, congrats, you get an interview. And I am stoked. And at the interview stage, you have a 50-50 shot. So I felt better, knowing that the interview was going to be actually the strongest part of my application. So the Harvard interview is actually very different from the other schools. The Harvard interview is more of a hot seat, rapid fire drill where they just drill you with questions. So they do a lot of due diligence. They'll go through websites that you mentioned on your application and they'll read through different news articles of you and they'll try to find different things to kind of ask you questions on. And I guess they're trying to just uncover the truth. So I tried the impossible task of preparing for any possible question they sent me. I went through my resume and knew the exact details behind every single bullet. I basically memorized my essay to know exactly what parts they were going to ask me about. More importantly, I also did a lot of mock interviews with alumni, current students. I clearly remember feedback from one of the alumni after our mock. She just straight up told me,
I'm surprised you don't sound like someone who's cut out for Harvard.
What the? Let me know in the comments if you ever gotten feedback that direct. So the day of the interview comes, I'm in Boston, I have my dry clean suit, I got the red tie. I get to the waiting room and there's a bunch of people there dressed very nicely, being very professional. And I try to cut through the room, I start cracking some jokes, try to make light of the situation. And I think it works. I got a lot of laughs. Everyone's feeling a little more at ease. Eventually my interviewer calls me. I get up, I think I'm ready to go. I say hi politely. She has a very cool, calm demeanor, which kind of makes me feel like I need to put the professional on a little more. She brings me into the room. She tells me, hey, the note taker is not going to be here for us. Don't worry about it, just us two. And then she proceeds to ask me none of the questions I prepared for. So instead of asking me about CEOs I admire or specific bullets in my resume, she just asked me what was it like living in Italy for a summer? What was my favorite part of college? I'm not sure if this was by design, but by not having the note taker and all these personal questions rather than professional ones, I started to feel a lot more at ease and maybe a little bit too comfortable. And then instead of trying to sell her on why I should be in Harvard, I started kind of talking to her as, hey, I want you to be my friend. So when she asked me about Italy, instead of telling her,
oh yeah, it was very tough to manage the cultural differences.
I just told her,
Oh yeah, I was in the right rooms with the right people at the right times, and we all had a great time during my internship.
I probably also shouldn't have told her that my favorite part of college was being in a fraternity. Even though it's true and I grew a lot through the experience, I don't think being a white male who speaks like a stereotypical frat guy helps.
You guys up for a toga party?
But overall, I thought that, I came across as very likable, and you know what? That's the objective of the interview, right? I should be fine. So after basically the longest month of my life, in the hallway going to the meeting, I get the email from Harvard, and I open that email and it does not say congrats this time. My heart immediately sinks. I start leaning against the wall, and next thing you know, I'm just sitting in the corner of the hallway. So you got denial, thinking they must have confused my application on the portal, and then anger, thinking, dang, I really spent a whole year of my life on this. But mostly sadness, because you see, the MBA application is very holistic. It looks into your career goals, what you want out of your life. When you get a rejection, it kind of feels like you as a holistic person aren't good enough. I think of two big takeaways, one more technical and the other more philosophical, that I think you would find very valuable. The first is the concept of a warmth and competence scale. In my influence class last quarter, we ran a little experiment where we uploaded a 90-second introduction of ourselves, and our classmates ranked us on scales of warmth and competence in terms of how friendly we are and how competent or smart we are. Basically, the ideal is you want people to think that you're a very warm person, but also very competent, and that way they admire you. My results from the experiment weren't exactly shocking. I was in the 90th percentile of warmth, meaning that I was warmer per se than 90% of my classmates, but I was in the 10th percentile of competence, meaning that I was less competent than 90% of the class. So the big takeaway for me is to really work on projecting more competence. I spent my whole life working on being likable and projecting warmth because I was bullied as a kid and I wanted friends. And now I realize that not projecting competence at the same time has actually been hurting me. So the takeaway for you is to think about where you are on these axes. Are you projecting a lot of warmth but no competence like me? Or are you projecting a ton of competence but absolutely no warmth? You need to find that balance. We all have goals and things we want to accomplish in this life, and more than likely, we're gonna have to work with or through people to get those done. And that will mean that we have to shape their impressions of us. Our impressions matter, and we need to learn how to consciously put our best selves forward. The second big takeaway is a lesson relearned from Stoicism for me is not just to be okay with negative moments in your life, but to learn to love them and embrace them and make the most of them. Am I still disappointed? Sure. Did they make the right decision not accepting me? I can see where they're coming from. I sometimes think if I got one more promotion or if I left Deloitte to go work at a startup so I wasn't competing with so many consultants, then I would get in for sure. But I think it's probably better to channel the energy behind those thoughts into motivation for the next, goal or gratefulness. There's a quote that goes something like, not getting what you want can be a wonderful stroke of luck. And the more I think about it, the more it's true, because pretty much anything awesome that's happened in my life has come from not getting what I want. See, I feel like regardless where I went to school, I feel like I'd still be pursuing entrepreneurship and buying businesses and making YouTube videos. But, what would have been different is that I wouldn't have such strong relationships with some of my classmates now. I wouldn't be captain of a recreational D-League hockey team, and I wouldn't be in a band competing in Battle of the Bands. In fact, it probably would have made starting and growing the awesome relationship I have with my girlfriend now a lot harder or impossible. Her grandma revered Wharton, which I'm sure got me a lot of extra points. Speaking of, she's coming soon, so I need to wrap this up. So to end on a note of competence, I will be creating a video detailing the MBA application process and how I managed to get into most of the schools I applied to and get over $200,000 in scholarships. So please make sure to subscribe so you get notified when that happens. And I'll make sure to update the links in the description and add that video somewhere here on the screen. Thank you so much. I appreciate y'all. Have a good one.